a series of weekly reviews of where you need to be for anatomy. My name is Dr. Chung. Normally we do this in lecture, but this is a weird semester, and so we're stuck doing it somehow like this. Those of you who logged on earlier, apologize for the delay. Hopefully this will work now. A couple things about what you should have done last week. So you should be done all of the lecture videos. You should be done chapters 1 and 2 in your lab manual. In one of the videos, I spoke incorrectly, yet the slide was correct. So I said the word haploid and diploid, and I mixed them up. And I always do this. I'm a human. I make mistakes. Okay. So the male and female gametes, sperm and egg, they are haploid. Haploid means half the amount of DNA that you require to make a cell. And diploid is twice the amount of DNA that the amount is 2x. So the zygote is diploid and the gametes are haploid. So that's the one big thing that was unfortunately brought to my attention, and I will record the video again. I guarantee I'm probably going to make that same mistake again. So if I make the mistake, make sure you don't make the mistake. At least I'm owning up to that part. In terms of some of the things I noticed in the discussion with the lecture part, one part is stem cells. Stem cells are neat. I know a lot of you didn't realize that the only cells that are allowed to undergo mitosis in the body are stem cells. And one thing that I noticed some of you might, I don't want you to make the mistake of, is thinking that a stem cell starts with its entire collection of DNA and starts removing parts of it. A cell can never actually remove parts of its DNA. What a totipotent stem cell is capable of doing is reading the entire library of DNA. So the neat thing about this room in particular is at the basement of the Weber State Library. So imagine yourself, this library is the nucleus of that first fertilized zygote. It has all the books that it could possibly read, and it's allowed to read all of those books. As we start losing potency, so we go to pluripotency and multipotency and unipotency, what we're doing is we're not taking the books out of the library and throwing them away. Every time we clone this library of all of its books, all those books are still there, yet a unipotent stem cell is only allowed to read a certain section of those books, but it never is able to take the rest of those books that it's not allowed to read. It never throws them out. That DNA is always going to be inside every nucleus of every cell, and that started with the first fertilization of the two haploid cells to make the first diploid cell. The other thing or one more thing that we noticed, you want to be careful of your use of the words layers and region. Okay. And this is especially true in anatomy of a course like this. Is especially true when you're talking about serous membranes, like the pericardial serous membrane, or the peripleural serous membranes, or the peritoneal serous membrane in the abdomen. Okay. There is a difference between these two words. So if we consider a serous membrane, can you see well enough to see the orange and brown?
Yeah, not the difference, but you can see.
All right. So if we consider a layer, so let's do a serous membrane, let's do a pleural. Okay. So what we will have here, and so let's do a dorsal and ventral. That layer would be connective tissue. And the next deep layer would be epithelium. Now the key thing about this then is something like a lung is going to grow into this area, but it's actually never going to get in to this. And so we want to talk about the fact that wherever the lung is touching, let's say the lung, just for argument's sake, to make life easy because I'm not the best artist, let's say the lung is right here. Okay? So just right here from about there to there, where it contacts the lung itself, that would be the region of the visceral pleura. And the rest of this would be the parietal pleura. The reason why I want to caution you against using layer is because the visceral pleura has a connective tissue layer and an epithelial layer. The parietal pleura has an epithelial layer and a connective tissue layer as well. They are all the same. It's really the layers are governed by where they're located and what they're touching. Are they touching the organ or the body wall? So you want to try to stay away from saying the visceral layer of anything or the parietal layer of anything. You want to say the visceral region of something, because that includes both the connective and epithelial tissue. If you say visceral layer, then you're basically you're forgetting one thing. You're forgetting what type of tissue. And that makes this statement not as correct as saying visceral region, which groups those two tissues. Okay. So that's another thing that we noticed, and it always happens in anatomy. Okay. And a lot of instructors will say layer and region, but since we're trying to teach you how to use the words correctly, we want to try and be careful at how we actually use those words. The other thing then is flashcards. I know a lot of you may have taken anatomy in high school, may have even taken this class once or twice before. I'm not really a fan of flashcards. I don't recommend you study this class with flashcards. Honestly, any university level class, I wouldn't recommend a flashcard. Write it out for yourself. Okay? And the other thing is, I really don't recommend you buy a flashcard. Don't put money in other people's pockets. Flashcards are used well by professionals to really quickly jog their memory. But when you're a student, you're trying to learn this for the first time or unlearn this because you were not quite taught the detail that you're going to learn in this class, I would recommend you consider writing this stuff out for yourself. There is nothing that beats a writing device like this, okay? And even just a whiteboard or a simple sheet of paper, lots and lots of paper. This is one of the few classes in your college career where you might actually take a single pen and wear down all of the ink till it's empty, and you might actually need another one before the end of the semester because of all the writing you'll do. If you insist on using flashcards, 3x5, okay, and do them yourself, but don't buy them. You can't buy knowledge. You have to work it into here. And this Manus, with all these digits wrapped around a writing device and the effort of making the letters, is how that connects up here. So I'm not a fan of flashcards. Flashcards are something you might want to make for yourself at the end of your studies to make sure you've got everything down. But flashcards at the beginning is, because it's one piece of information, it's really hard for a student to take a flashcard and make a story from it. So you really want to make your story first and then your flashcards afterwards to say, or at least test yourself to make sure that you understand what it is that you need to know, all the pieces that you need to know. In lab this week is your first real quiz. So quizzes are not open book, so this is why we ask that you keep your camera on so we can watch what you're doing. Remember that you'll have your chapter 2 filled out. They'll ask for a random page out of chapter 2. You'll hold it up to the camera so that we can see it. Right? It's going to take a few seconds, so don't just hold it up and walk away. Hold it up and the instructor will probably tell you, so-and-so, can you please lift your lab manual so we can see the bottom of the page, because it's probably going to be hard for them to see the entire thing. But it's not open book, so you are expected to close it, put it away, and they're going to be watching you for cheating, so to speak, at the end of it. So please don't cheat. Don't force us to drag you through student court, so to speak, and have you charged formally for this. No one wants to do that, so just don't open yourself to that need for anything like that to happen. Always, always, always remember it is the surface, the side, so right or left, okay? And in some cases, sometimes we also want the anterior or posterior. Okay. So in your answers, generally you will always have to have something surface, so something surface. Sometimes you need an anterior and posterior added to that, and if it's paired, a right or a left. Don't lose points on this. Try not to lose points for getting the word surface. Don't lose points on spelling. Okay, these are areas that you can and will lose points if you don't pay attention to it. Okay. I understand that computers have spell check. I can't really stop that. But spell check can be taught things and can also point out whether or not you're spelling it correctly or not, as long as you type it a number of times and put it in the spell check's dictionary. But I didn't say that, and I don't know what's going on about that. In terms of my recommendations for study, either lab or lecture, I wouldn't split the two. I know a lot of instructors will tell you study lab and then study lecture. I try to use lab to augment lecture. I wouldn't try to use these two as separate classes, even though they almost seem like separate classes, because I don't go over a lot of lab stuff in lecture. We build on what you learn in lab in lecture itself. Okay. I would focus on trying to stick with the lecture slides for lecture. In lab, we just teach you what's in the lab manual, so focus on the structures in the lab manual. Don't add any more to them. It makes the class that's already hard even harder when you add more terms to it. I wouldn't focus on memorizing definitions. I would make the stories. I would link these things together rather than memorize definitions. You'll find that definitions take up a very, very small portion of either the lab exam or quiz or the lecture exam. Slides are your study guide. I don't give you a study guide. I give you the slides, and I basically test you on the information I've taught you. Don't expect an exam to come straight off the slide. That's never going to happen. It will come from you applying the information on the slides in a logical manner, hopefully, that you've made an effort to do throughout the rest of the semester. Study groups seem to work really well. Unfortunately, this being the semester of completely online and social distancing, you might have to do it by Zoom or any other, if you guys want to change phone numbers or something and do it by WhatsApp or FaceTime or however you want to do it. Technology could be your friend, right? And technology, in some cases like today and all last week, is also your arch nemesis. Get used to using it though. It's here to stay, at least for the next 6 months. I predict we'll be an entire year, so January we'll be in the same situation as well. It's not going to get any better because humans are humans, and Americans like our freedom. Sometimes people can be stupid that way. Spelling is really important. I would practice your spelling. I'd write it out over and over again. Okay, write it out over and over again. Or since this is all on computer, maybe just type it out over and over again, and maybe your spell checker will learn and not flag something that you've spelled incorrectly, and you've learned then how to type it correctly. In terms of then staying ahead, this class only works if you try to stay ahead. So this week in lecture, you're learning the integument system, which is your skin. Okay, you no longer going to call it a skin, you're going to call it the integument system. We generally will make it through the first lecture, generally the first day. If not, we'll get through about 95% of it on the first day, and we'll get about halfway through the skeleton this week. So if you are watching the videos, if you're reading through the slides, that'd be my recommendation is the first day you sit down and you watch the integument lecture. A good place to stop if you have a short attention span would be finish up the layers of the integument. Here's where we have to remember, we have to use the word layers correctly. So finish up your epithelial and your connective tissue layers and break down the individual layers of that epithelium and the connective tissue. There's a reason why I'm using these digits in this manner. And if you watch the video, hopefully it'll make sense. Let's do this one more time. Okay, spirit fingers will help you learn. You can take a break after you master the layers and then go into the epithelial layers, functionally making something else like a hair or a nail or a gland. Okay, and that's a good place to stop. And then with the skeleton, we generally break it down into types of bones, shapes of bones, embryonic origins of bones. That's going to be important to appreciate how some bones don't form from cartilage, even though that's what you were taught in most schools, that every bone in your body is made from a piece of cartilage. Not all of them are actually made from cartilages, so understand that there's a difference between the two. The origins of that is going to be important to appreciate for lecture. You don't have to know this for lab. All the bones that you learn in lab are the bones I would test you on in a lecture exam. And obviously all the bones that you're learning in lab are going to be fair game for lab as well. It's very, very important for you in lab, whenever you're identifying a bone, to say that it's a bone. So you have to write a B or the word bone. And if it's paired, You have to write right or left. And some unpaired bones, like a vertebra, has a left and right transverse process, a left and right pedicle, a left and right lamina, left and right superior and inferior articular process and facets. Okay? So those have to be identified as left and rights as well, because they are paired structures on an unpaired bone. Okay? And that stuff will be explained to you in the the lab video. So you don't need to worry about figuring out that right now because those words came out of my mouth like right now. You need to watch the lab videos, and these are videos that I would recommend you watch a lot. Right? The benefit of having a lot of videos, you can watch them over and over. Again, you can stop, you can go to the bathroom, you can get a snack from the fridge, or shoot the breeze with someone, and come back and watch, but take notes the entire time, and then take notes again the second time. And then maybe at the end of the week, write out what you thought you learned, and then compare that to what you actually learned, what was in the videos, what are in the slides, and make sure that the discrepancy between the two is small. If the discrepancy is huge, then you've forgotten a lot, and that's not a good way to start the semester. Week 3 starts with Labor Day. So you can party maybe for like a couple of hours on Monday, and then you got to get back to work because week 3's lab is the skull. And the skull by itself makes the professor like me sweat in terms of having to review the skull. So a student like you having to learn the skull ought to make you scared. And if you're not, then you will be. The key thing here is the skull takes a lot of time. And so next week's lab, okay, the videos are long. And so you're probably going to go over time in terms of watching the videos longer than the 2 hours, right? You remember you have to stay on for that entire lab time, and you'll probably be watching longer. If you need to log off because you have to go back to work or anything else, that's fine, but make sure you're staying on and participating in the lab discussion. Make sure you're staying on for that entire time, and you'll have to watch those videos quite a few times, and I really strongly recommend Open Lab next week and the weeks following, because we have skulls in the lab, and those foramen in the skulls, which are the holes that's perforating through the skull to allow the central nervous system access to its environment, those are really important, and those are really hard to find, and pictures don't do this justice. So go to the lab and hold the skull. Ask your instructor for a pipe cleaner to run it through the foramen, just like we do in the videos, and hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. But this is one of the few times I really, really encourage you. I always encourage you to go to Open Lab, but this is one of the weeks where you really need to. In order to understand the material. Those of you who are taking it from a far, far distance out of state, I don't know what to tell you, man. You can try and figure it out on a picture, but this is one aspect of anatomy in terms of the floor of the skull is not really something that lends itself to distance learning. It's one section. Maybe you don't do as well as you wanted to. Pick it up on the rest. But the skull next week is a very, very, very hard system or set of bones to understand. After that is appendicular skeleton, so upper limb and lower limb, and every one of those is a right or a left, and so don't ever forget right or left. So those are very, very important. I can't think of anything else. We'll try to incorporate a chat next time. There won't be one on Labor Day. I believe campus is closed, and so we won't be able to do this live that Monday. We'll try and figure out another week or another day next week, and then from here on in, hopefully then on Mondays, once we get all the technical issues ironed out, we'll try and do this live at 10:30 on Mondays as a review of what you should be doing, and hopefully as to sort of prime you for the upcoming exams as well. So have a good week or two. Okay.